Audio test. Before I move any further, we'll have some people come in here and confirm that they can hear me because I ran into that same error. Yesterday's class, or was that the last meeting I was in? I can't remember. Where it would show me that audio was coming through, but it actually wasn't going through. So get a few people in here. Good God. All right. See, this is today is November 5th. Sixth. That's right. Yes, it's 5th. Good golly. The days they blur together. Let's move this camera over a little bit. Where I can we'll zoom out a little bit. Oops, too much. Okay, that should still be beautiful. Kind of center it. And next up, how's everyone doing today? In here, Zoom. Can you all hear me online? Let me know. Because I need you to confirm that because I think it was the last class or last meeting. Okay, good. Excellent. Yeah, that's weird. It did not beep at me to let me know this person was in the waiting room. There it goes. That's weird. Okay. See here. So last time we were into what was it? It was crimes against the public. How far did we get in that? Remind me. Where did we leave off at? Already on it. That's where we left off at, yeah. It was a long night.
And I could hear her like screaming at the TV at the election.
Oh, good golly.
Was it a good or bad night? Well, she was scared, and then she got out and she went, so she was.
Yeah. Well, apparently there's something going on with the computer. It's just sitting here saying it's not responding. If you guys can. Oh, there it goes. Now it's finally moving. Okay, good. Yeah, the election stuff last night. Oh my goodness. That's one of those things that I actually went to sleep. That was one of the 3 hours of sleep I got was during that. Maybe 2 out of those hours. Oh my goodness. It's always interesting to see how much stake people put into it because it's like, yeah, it's a big thing, but it's sort of like at the end of the day, it sort of reminds me of the Super Bowl. It's like, yeah, someone takes home a prize, they get to say something or do something, I guess, and then it's like, what real effect does it have? I don't know, I feel good. Right? Maybe it has some type like for this stuff, like election stuff. It's like maybe it'll have an effect, but that's gonna be something it's several levels removed. I mean, it's obviously that's wrong in this field. It's like, okay, here we are actually existing at federal things. How many levels out? Federal, state, local. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit before you can actually see anything there most of the time. And so it's like, don't ever look at those people as like your personal saviors. I see people do that a lot. That's what's one that bothers me. It's like, yeah, realize it's a job and hopefully that it's done well, but it doesn't really matter who's in it so long as someone's doing it well. Ideally, I like the party stuff to switch back and forth because I like no movement because I like stability in society, but that's me personally. And so that's one of those things that's like, oh, always interesting. That's why I always say it's like, that's how I vote is I always, I never go straight ticket or anything like that. I usually pick people. It's like, I'm going to cancel your vote on this one. That's what I literally do. And so that'll be later today. I can start calling that kind of stuff. And like, you're the only person going to know who I voted on this one thing. Did you vote this way? No, you didn't vote that way. Dang it. Because that happens too sometimes where it's like, yeah, I thought you were going to vote this way. I didn't vote that way. Well, yeah, I guess I screwed that one up. I didn't get to disagree. Right. And so if you look at it that way, it's a good way to kind of resolve interpersonal stresses or even internal ones because it's like now you're doing it right. You're using it to relieve stress rather than getting all worked up with it. But that's how I handle it. As for, let's see, life today, back to criminal law. So we were in property stuff. I want to scroll through the outline, see if there's anything left out of this. Yeah, we were talking about regulating relationships seems to be the point. Let's see where this thing pumps up if it reminds me. It does. Yay. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. All right. And so as we start dealing with issues, okay. Right there. Okay. Cool. So as we start looking at crimes such as like bigamy, prostitution, pornography, to some degree realize you're dealing with, or like in the previous slide, we were dealing with adults. It's not going to move. Why is it not moving? Hello. There it goes. So it's like adult relationships, consensual relationships, we're regulating to some degree here. It's like the behaviors that should otherwise be private, right? And so that's where you really start running into issues with these things because you're starting to regulate private relationships that should really not be something with burden. So that's one of those lines there associated with that. The other line is that morality aspect of it. And there we go. And so that morality aspect will start to differentiate these things in different ways too, right? So it's like that last slide where you look at it and you see whether it's same-sex relationships or non-traditional sex acts, or whether it's looking back at it, seduction, adultery, things like that, where it's like you're talking about not just individual relationships, but regulating the nature of those things. And so that's something quite a bit different than when you start moving over to things like prostitution and pornography. Pornography might be a good middle ground if you actually look at it from that way. It's like you're looking at legitimate, like, not say legitimate, good grief. You can use that phrase. Like, what are we talking about there? To talk about it in terms of, child pornography, it's like, yeah, there is no place for that because what you're dealing with there, the nature of it. You move to adults, though, that line in age, it's like, okay, now people start to look at it as acceptable. And to what degree is it the group actually looks at it as acceptable? And like I said, I think it was Matt versus Ohio, the case that gave us the exclusionary rule at the state level. What she was ultimately charged with was something like pornography. I can't remember if that was the specific charges. That was a person who had police basically force their way into her house, wrestle with her when they presented a false warrant and she wanted to see it. Let's see, they wrestled with her, arrested her, they searched their entire house for something she didn't have. That would have been if I remember correctly, I think it was a suspect to a burglary or something, bank robbery or something like that. What they found were, you have some lewd pictures here. That's all we have here to justify what we've done. We'll use that. And so it's like, that's another thing that happens is that lowest threshold for what is legal and what isn't can very quickly be weaponized. And in that case, it was, right? And so we've got to keep those lines as clear as we can for what is acceptable and what isn't. Some of these clearly aren't. Some of them we have trouble drawing lines with. That's that next one, prostitution, right? Here it's illegal, but
Potato, potato.
yeah, it's like potato, tomato. I still don't know the difference, right? And so that's kind of what we're dealing with here. Like that, it can be something extremely bad for society. If you look at what that does in cities, that kind of just what it does to the people's lives who have to engage in it. Not just that have to engage in it, but some people have to, right? Because the context of their lives stuck in there. That's different than some of that stuff that happens in Nevada, but is it? That's a hard line to draw, right? Is there any difference between working a street corner and working a farm? I don't know. I know government likes taxes on it. So it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, there's arguments there to make it legal, I guess. And so that moral line becomes one that becomes more important for people. Let's see what else here. Pandering is one of those technical terms. Usually you'll see that one come up for the I guess you say modern term of pimping. So whenever you see that word pandering, that's what that's relating to. So if you ever hear someone saying you're pandering to your audiences, that's kind of what they're insinuating there to some degree. That's the historical use of that term. Let's see. Yeah, that's probably enough about that. We'd already talked about the relationship stuff, bigamy, all that. All right. So moving into the statutes, here you can see who may institute prosecution for adultery. is the unlawful voluntary sex of married person with one of the opposite sex. And when the crime is between persons, only one of them is married. Both are guilty of adultery. Ooh. See how that gets regulated, right? Both people. Right? Let's see here. Bigamy. Married to one person who remains living, marries any other person, except in cases specified in the next section, is guilty of bigamy. Curious as to what that next section was, because I don't remember. This was a long time ago. Put this together. 3 years ago, something like that. Prostitution. What does it mean to be prostitute? This is one of those things that it's funny because you literally have to spell it out. Here's what it means. Intercourse of basically any type, and they list those out. Right? With any person that's not your spouse, in exchange for money, value. Wait a second. That's kind of interesting to put that in there. I don't know what the implications are there, but that is kind of interesting if you think about it, right? Offense, punishment, fines. Any person who does this, you're looking at, let's see, trying to figure where the lines are. I don't like it whenever they leave like this. As you can see, mentions pandering there. Purpose of prostitution should be guilty of pandering. Upon conviction of any offense, shall be guilty of felony, punished by imprisonment, not less than 2 years, not more than 20, and fine of $1,000, not more than 3,000 first conviction, and then it goes up from there for subsequent convictions. Right, so you can see that as it works through it. Yeah. Indecent exposure. Here's where we talked a little bit about that. We mentioned that one last time. Here, exposing of oneself. Procures counsel assist anyone to expose oneself. Writes, composes, stereotypes, prints, photographs, that. What the hell's that? Here, let me share the screen so if you guys have this pulled up, you can see it too. Let's see here. Boom, over here. Share. Yes, right here. Make that a little bit bigger. Look at those last two right there. Indecent exposure, indecent exhibitions, obscene material. Writes, composes, stereotypes, prints, photographs, designs, copies, draws, engraves, or keeps for sale. Not only downloads. Okay. And then there you go. So you've got secondary issues here, right? And so this statute is related to one thing, then you have that other issue. So you got overlap there, right? That's good. Okay. Next one. Solicitation. Person convicted, not eligible for deferred sentence. Right. So we start dealing with this stuff. What is it you're talking about here? The lines for this stuff are not as clear as they should be at times. I guess it's probably the way to put it, right? What is that item right there? Right? Any obscene material or child pornography. What's obscene material? Right. We'll break those two apart first. Composes. We'll deal with that part. Writes, composes, prints, photographs, designs, draws, engraves, paints. What are we talking about there? Nope. Used to be a flyer. Nude photography, nude things like that. Depending on where you're at, depending on the time frame, those would violate that, right? That's that dividing line. What is it? Are we looking at something that has value or something that has illicit value is what you start talking about, right? it doesn't have any legitimate value, I guess, is another way of looking at it. That's why I used that term earlier. But it's like, that's not really the right phrase, right? Where society draws that line. Next part. Ooh. What's the difference between something that would fall under that statute and where's the marker? Over here. This right here. Netflix movie. You have any idea what I'm talking about? Good. We'll talk about that then. About 2, maybe 3 years ago, there was a bit of a public outcry related to Netflix and a movie that they published called, if I remember correctly, I think it was called Cuties. I think it can still be available. I don't know. I didn't watch it because I saw clips. I thought it was pretty close to obscene. Where it was children under the age of, was it 12 or was it 10? I can't remember how young they went. Basically, they were engaging in the performance industry. You're going to be dancers, superstars, that kind of thing. So we're going to take a bunch of kids and force them to perform and do dances that were of a sexual nature. Okay. Yeah. It's like, what are we talking about here? Where's that line at again? Are we crossing it there? Maybe. What we start talking about to some degree is the sensitivities that people have for that, or also that underlying things you're trying to pass something off as one when it's really the other. You're lying, right? If I were here, I can actually show you something kind of price for that out. Netflix movie. Cuties. I don't want to watch it. News. Removing its most controversial, not the reason you think. This was this year, apparently. Here's why it caused so much outrage. Old saying goes, hypersexualizing its cast. Does it tell you their ages in this thing? You can see them there. They're young. Let's just do this. Age, rage, damage, image. Nope, not in there. Okay, let's go back. No, I don't want to see that. Give me half of this. Okay. Ages. Girl's father. That's you. I don't know what that is. Freaking out. You should try it. They might like it a lot. What the hell? They're advocating for it. Okay. And now you start to see what the problem is here. Who's advocating for what? In what directions? Here's someone who is a survivor of that. This one, I bet they'll actually mention the age, just because of the nature of it. It's biased, but it'll mention age. Outrage, rage. Apparently not. All right, let's look for numbers. 1. Nope. 1981. Okay, this doesn't have the whole thing showing, maybe. Advertisement. Oh, you want me to sign in? I'm not going to sign in. But you can see there, they are not old. Right? Not by any means. Now, the 11 on the previous page. So one of the pages I was floating around, I didn't stay there long enough. I don't like stuff. Yeah, that's one of those things. That's just one of the worst things right there. Not the worst, but that's in that category where you start getting into that area. And so that leads to an idea of a discussion related to those thresholds, where we place those things, how sensitive we are to them, how surface level they are, and sometimes they're not. Here's what I wanted to show. Next. Okay. Person under this sentence shall be eligible for a deferred sentence. Okay. Since it came up, we'll talk about that real quick. We haven't gotten into the sentencing stuff. That's at the end. You ever heard that phrase before, deferred sentence? Do you know what it means? Yeah, good. I'll tell you. Basically, what that means is we're going to hold off sentencing, right? Assuming you meet the parameters of whatever this alternative punishment, this alternative sanction we're going to get you. That's where in some textbooks they'll talk about intermediate sanctions, like things like sometimes we things like community service, depending on what you're dealing with, right? Something very low level or something more involved and more severe. But basically, what you do is you open up the thresholds there for the things that you can do based on discretion rather than the punishments prescribed by law, those types of things. Ideally, it's there to benefit people, but it doesn't always do that, right? If you start looking at it, it's like there's that balance between when we want to hold people accountable and we want to let them go because it would be excessive or too much or just not right. That's a careful balance to keep. This one's related to the types of crimes that we're dealing with and whether or not they even have that as an option, right? Do we want to even have this as an option where we can have people who could commit these types of crimes, be convicted, and still not serve any time, serve their punishment, right? Is that something that should be a discussion? Here, nope, not even a discussion, right? In this state, or whenever this was put through, maybe this to this day, at least the sentiment was that you were convicted of this crime. You don't even have that as a discussion. That's not an option on the table for you, right? So you could see to some degree the condemnation, how it spans across processes for what we're dealing with. You can do this to some degree. At the same time, I'll talk to you real quickly about I think I actually might have mentioned this earlier in the semester. So this is the point where it would come up again a little bit. Social spheres where they've been advocating for things like minor attracted persons. Did I talk about that in here? Okay, good. Realize that in California, or 5 years back, something like that, they opened it up to where they can now make the decision whether or not someone is on what would be sworn as the registration, Sexual Offenders Registration Act, Registration Notification Act. Right? Because of this and the state level ones, they notify you where people are different sex criminals, I guess you'd say, convicted persons, whatever you want to call them. Do you go on this list or not? Well, if you're convicted of a crime, is it a decision that's automatically associated with the conviction, or is it a discretionary decision? You start dealing with a discretionary decision of whether or not you're on that list. You have to register as a sex offender. That's where they drew that line. They gave it a 10-year window, 14 to 24. So those are your maximum thresholds, right? You could have 24-year-old who's been held criminally guilty for engaging in relations with someone that young, get their punishment and not have to register as a sex offender. I don't know. What was the purpose of this thing in the first place? Right? And so you can see the ways that society moves, and that to some degree, things evolve over time, and you can see pressures moving in different directions. You don't know necessarily whether it's like a naturally evolving thing, I guess, or if it's a concerted effort. That's one of those things. But something like that, you can see changes taking place in different places, different directions. That kind of highlights the difficulty of these issues, because people want to draw the lines wherever they want, or wherever they're at. Difficult thing. The condemnation we give it, if we give it, or if we're able to completely, I guess, relieve ourselves of that. How easy is it to say that, yeah, that's something that we can look the other way for that? Well, if you don't feel any thing wrong with it. It's really easy to do. You look at that and you have that moral line in there that says that that's a distinct thing. That's an issue. That's pretty clear for you. Apparently it's not clear for everybody. And that's going to be across all these things. Here, another aspect of it, the electronic side of things. What do they mean by downloading, that transfer? Realize that as you do that, particularly with these electronic ones, you end up with people who massively increase their counts because every time that you take it, that's one, and then every time you send it, that's another, right? And then you have all the times that people copy things and alter things, and taking a picture of a picture is its own. Come on. So it'd be one of those things where it's like you have something that's a criminal picture, you have a picture of someone holding that picture. That picture of someone holding that picture is also criminal. Right? All right, that's the last slide on that one. Thank God for that. Yeah. Yeah, some of those things are nasty to talk about. Let's see, criminal law. So now we're into 9. Here's we're going to move against crimes against government, I think. So I think that's where we move into next. That or some drugs, one or the other. Crimes against government and terrorism. Excellent. Download these. Boop. And come on. Okay, to download it. All right. So I was moving to crimes against government. Realize that we had that conversation about what it is to be the public, and that's, a hard line to draw. It really is. To give you another idea for how hard that line is to draw. In the last couple of classes, we had it in relation to like governmental authority, the imposition of laws, of course, sanctions, that kind of thing. But think about it in terms of who takes what actions, and that line between who's what, I guess, would be a good way to look at it. Probably the easiest way to kind of identify it would be this one's a little off topic, but you'll see how it relates in a second. Second Amendment, people, police. Those 3 concepts. If you look at how those things intertwine, this is one where, like I said, little off topic, not really though. Probably more of an intro kind of thing. I guess I probably should have brought it up a little bit more when you talk about self-defense stuff. If you look at the arguments for weapons, why we should have access to weapons or not. One of the arguments against, I guess, an interpretation of the Second Amendment is that the right of the people to bear arms kind of thing. That it's an argument that we need to have this group right here be those who are armed, right? That is one of those arguments for it, that as some would interpret it, because you're talking about the people, these are government limitations, not necessarily individual rights. And what you're actually doing is you're authorizing the government here to have weapons. Seems like a cyclical argument to me, but that's an argument that's put forth because they blur that line between what it is to be people, to be a public service, to be the public, and to serve the public. That's what you have mixing there. People can't draw those lines in their heads, and so those lines become harder to talk about. Right? Crimes against the government, typically what you start talking about here. Crimes against the public were kind of like nuisance behaviors or things that are kind of harmful to people on the aggregate. What do you think crimes against the government generally refers to? To some degree, you start dealing with things that interfere with governmental actions. Remember thinking that that's a lot of what we're dealing with here. governmental actions. Sure, nothing else popped through on that. Nothing else has come through yet. Oh. Like if you look at this, that first one right here, perjury, what is that? Yeah, it's lying, but it's lying under oath. It's not about the fact that you're doing that. It's for what it affects, right? What is it that this is affecting? Judicial proceedings, right? It doesn't matter whether or not you lie or anything like that. It's, are you trying to pass it off as truth to the government now, right? You can lie in general if you're using it to con people out of stuff. We've got statutes for that. But this is where we have it for where you're altering governmental actions by doing so. That's not good, right? Other types, of course, it tells you it's like here, you took an oath, it was administered by those who have that authority. That testimony was given, right? It was false testimony, it was knowingly false, right? It was vital is another way of looking at it to whatever it is that you're dealing with, right? Yeah. And you pass that off with the intention that it would be believed, right? Subordination of perjury is just getting someone to lie in proceedings. False swearing is when you do it in other places where there's some stake in the game, but not necessarily judicial proceedings themselves, like documentations, that kind of stuff. When you look at bribery, what is it? You know, it's determined what term for embracer was because there's a distinction there, but it leaves you at the moment. It all has to do with the fact that it's a public official. That's what it is. Embracer is where it's not a public official. Right? Same kind of, so you start doing like blackmail versus extortion. Extortion is public official. Otherwise, it's perjury, defined. Trial, hearing, investigation, deposition, certification, declaration, subscribing a statement authorized by law, that kind of a thing. Right? So you can see all the different areas that it comes in. Right? So just think about all the times you have to say something if you're going to trial proceedings of any type. How many times we ask the same kinds of questions and how much your words change. Right? That's the line. You have someone who really wants to, they can walk you into something that sounds kind of different than what you said before, and it might be interpreted as a lie. And that's a dangerous thing. Contradictory statements, right here. One or more trials or hearings, makes two or more statements under oath that are true when in fact they contradict each other. So now all I have to do is find something that contradicts. Right? And if you look at it that way, it's one of those things that I talked about it in terms of that here. Said whenever you're arguing like that, they usually give you the three on attack of law, facts, character. This is one of those that's really interesting because it opens up that. But basically what the principle is, kind of the statement they'll give you is if you're false in one thing, you're false in the whole thing. Right? If you have a document that has a false statement in it, the entire document itself is arguably false. You then have to make that determination throughout the entire thing if you're really going to do it, or you let it go, depending on what your strategy is for that trial. Right? That would be like you have a witness's statement here. They said something different here. There is a distinction in that. You can either say that that person is lying, one of those things is false, or that there's some distinctions yet to be made, or your options, really. Right? Perjury is a felony and committed on the trial, indictment for felony. And so you look at 2 to 20, when it's any other 1 to 10. Trying to get it, also a felony. Bribery of a fiduciary. There you go. Basically, anyone who's in control of money to some degree. Right? So you start thinking about all the times money's attached to all the different positions associated with governmental positions, anything that has a budget, anything that has value to it. It's like you have people who are trying to use their efforts to influence it. Where are you at? Right here. officers, officers receiving bribes, jurors receiving bribes by jurors. So what they do is they hit the main targets right here for the processes of law. Right? You gotta start dealing with the officers themselves, those making determinations related to these matters, those types of things. So they'll have specific statutes to those. And here you go. Some more crimes against the government. You start looking at these official misconduct in office. Okay. So it talks about here public official acting in that capacity occurred during the course of their duties under the color of law, I mean, it's within their authority to do so, something in their authority. They must have evil intent. So that's that malicious intent. That's where you have to establish it. Is it something they did this with that evil purpose or not? And like I said, that positive, negative thing, that inversion is always there. Am I going to say it's something good coming and do something bad? And if I've got a good argument to say why it was good or why I thought it was good to begin with, that's probably not justified. Right? Because I have that argument. I'm obviously not evil because I did it for these justifiable reasons. Whether or not that's the case, though, that's for juries to decide. It's their job. Okay, obstruction of justice and contempt. Not important. Those are some of the, to some degree, they're some of the lowest level. But if you think about the authority and the discretion to charge people with those types of things, those are going to largely relate to, well, obstruction of justice. You're talking about police officers on the scene. Contempt of court, you're talking about judges. Right? Who has the authority to do those things and under what grounds? Right? In what ways can you obstruct justice? Let's turn to the statutes. We'll come back to treason in a minute. All right. Here's where it starts talking about willful neglect of duty, because that's the other side of things. Omission of duty, obstructing. Any person who willfully delays or obstructs any public officer in the discharge, attempt to discharge duty is guilty of misdemeanor. Nothing in this section shall preclude a person from recording the activity of law enforcement in a public area as long as the recording activity does not delay or obstruct the law enforcement agent in his or her duty. That seems a bit cyclical, circular, whatever you want to say there, right? It's obstruction, unless we determine it's not obstruction. Or if we determine it is obstruction. Okay? When you make those distinctions, realize that you as a person making that distinction, what does that mean? You are perfectly allowed to report a police officer who's conducting any type of business in a public area, unless it's obstructing them, at which point they'll notify you. So they'll tell you whether or not you can report them. Now, are they going to? Well, if you run into a bad one, they're certainly not going to want to report it either. So how do you make those distinctions? Right? That's got to be you in the scene. You might get tied up in the court proceedings before you finally get the truth. For what? Recording an interaction. How many times has that been vital to finding the truth of what actually happens? Right? If I said a person pulled over for a, was it traffic signal, taillight, something like that, gets shot in the back 8 times. Officer moves taser over next to dead body. 2 officer reports say that they gave CPR to the dead body. Yeah, I'm going to call everyone their liars if I see a video that doesn't show any of that stuff that they report in their reports and shows me things that weren't in their reports, right? So how do we manage that? You're gonna have people who have to press this one a little bit, and some people who will press it too far. Okay, contempt. Trial judge has the power to cite contempt anyone who, in the presence of open court, willfully obstructs judicial proceedings. If necessary, the judge may punish the person cited for contempt after an opportunity to be heard has been given. Understand? No, I'm going to take a little detour. Why? Because you need to see this. I think I mentioned this last time. Right here, boom. No, it actually sends me emails because I started watching stuff once a few years back. Good grief, that's funny. All right, let's try it this way. I didn't mean to go from, I just searched that. Boom, this is gonna have the words. See if I saved it there. It's a pseudonym. This is from a couple years ago. Boom, boom. Let's see here. This is related to prisons. Beginning to 6:30 should have it. Let's click this, see if it's still live. Oh, no thanks. Let's see here, share screen so you all can see it. And I think the beginning will outline what exactly happens to this person. This is over in England a couple years ago. Basically what happens to this person, I don't want to say persona non grata, but kind of, yeah, over in England. Arguably, people would put him forward as racist, that kind of thing. It's like, I don't think about that. I only look at the court treatment because that's the only thing that really concerns me for this one, because it's not even our country. But seeing how these opportunities presented themselves here and how our systems are similar and the overlaps here for their opportunities, what you see, opportunities for abuses. Okay, hold on. I got to change audio because I'm not listening to the speaker thing. Let's see here. That's going to be on here. Speakers and nightlight wire. Here we go. Audio. Boom. I need to drive for display audio. Let's try this one. That's not what we can. That's much better.
No, can you explain it? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean?
Tommy, we all saw you get in the back of that police car, that police truck. What happened after that?
So everyone saw visibly I was arrested for breach of the peace. What I find surprising is no one's ever mentioned breach of the peace. No one's ever mentioned the fact that's what I was arrested for. I was arrested for breach of the peace and I was driven to Leeds Ellen Road police station. So a 10-minute drive from the court. I got to the police station. Now, anyone who's been arrested knows the first thing they do is they take you to the front desk where you're booked in for your crime. You're asked if you want your solicitor, and then you're put in a cell to wait.
Solicitor's lawyer over there, just in case you got that phrase.
Wait for your interview. This was different straight away. I wasn't booked into the police station. I was held in a side room at the police station for probably 40 minutes. Which straight away I was thinking, what's the police station's not going to be busy. It's in the morning. And I was then taken, I got brought to the front desk and told that I'm being moved to court. I'm being taken straight to court. Again, I asked for breach of the peace. They said no, for contempt of court.
Ooh.
So then they took me in a police wagon in the back of the court, and I was taken to the courtroom. What actually transpires is that now, when people have to ask why this happened in this way, because if they'd have arrested me outside the court for contempt of court, and everyone would have known I'd been arrested for contempt of court, because my solicitor contacted the police station as soon as I'd been arrested. I said I want a solicitor. They spoke with my solicitor, and the police station told my solicitor, Alison Gurdon, that I was being released.
Alive.
I wasn't released. And then when I arrived at the court, I again asked for my legal multiple times. I said I want to speak with my solicitor. I was told I couldn't speak with my solicitor. Now, if my solicitor had known, if there wasn't a breach of the peace and I'd just been arrested for contempt of court, my solicitor would have known to send a representative to the court. But they refused me point blank. I was not allowed the opportunity to speak with my solicitor.
So why did they tell your solicitor that you had been released? If you had not been released, did you ever walk free of the police station or the courthouse?
No, I was transported straight from the police station in the van, straight into court, straight into a cell of court, and then refused the opportunity to speak with my lawyers. And brought up before the judge. I stood before the judge where he watched, I'd say, 7 minutes of the video. Remember, it was over an hour long.
Right.
He watched 7 minutes. I was then put back down in the cell Still, I was asking for my solicitor,
Okay, so he said video. Here's what he did. He was on the public street talking about public trials taking place, did not have a gag order issued. While he was doing so, judge saw him issue gag order, picked him up off the street. That's what happened, right? The gag order was related to rape gangs. He was publicizing that fact that area was having an issue with rape gangs. I think they had, I forget how many dozen people that were under trial that day, kind of thing. It's like more than one. It's like, yeah, you start dealing with some really serious issues that people probably should be aware of,
I was in.
apparently. That would be an insight, an inference that is not necessarily inherent.
A prepared lawyer that was at the court was then put before me, where I told him again, I
Given
want
a
to speak to my
lawyer, even though he has
solicitor,
a lawyer.
So this was a public defender.
a public defender,
Now you don't get your lawyer. Here's
who I asked again, can I speak to my solicitor? And I asked him, what is it I've said? What is it I've done? I was not told. He just said contempt of court. I said, but what? It's still sitting here now. Bearing in mind, I'm going to face another trial in a few weeks. I've still not been told what I've said. In fact, this trial was supposed to happen today on the 4th of September. The reason it's been put back is because they still haven't told me what it is in that hour-long video that breaches contempt of court.
Can I take you back to when you first met the judge and he watched 5 or 7 minutes of the video? Did he ask you any questions or say anything, or did you just sit there while he watched it?
I sat there while I watched it. I made it clear that if there was a problem, I'd delete it. If there's a problem with it, I would delete it instantly if there was a problem. I think that lots of people have read so many things. I remember getting to prison and reading in reports that I pled guilty.
getting to
I was
prison.
never asked if I was guilty or not guilty.
You didn't
I
get
was never asked. I was
No
never
plea.
told what crime I committed. So bearing in mind, I know
No
this,
jail.
I know what's happening in court.
prison.
I know that I'd
This
asked
is England.
and it not get adjourned so that I can speak with a QC. In fact, that come out in my appeal because in the defendant's notes, it said that I'd asked and said I want to speak to a QC. And I was sentenced to 13 months in prison.
So
13
the first
months
time
in
you went
prison.
before the judge. and
Over
you
a year.
reviewed the video, did you have your public defender?
For talking into a camera out on a public street. Yeah. Where does it go from there? I'll give you a couple more minutes and I'll probably stop
The
this.
lawyer with you then?
No, I had no one with me then.
So then when you were given this public defender, did you appear before the judge a second time?
I did. I appeared before the judge a second time, where the defense man said that basically if he went up and apologised, then that's it. And we went through previous cases, for example, so that people understand. Like Jamie Bolger's killers live under a court order that no one can name them.
That's a different story. That's out of England. 2 juveniles killed I think it was like an 8 or 9-year-old violently in one of the most nasty kind of ways. Like they enjoyed it sadistically. They were kids though, so they're out free. They have to have their identity changed every few years because people figure out who they are. And yeah, someone's going to want to hold them accountable. Right. And so he's talking about, we had someone who's released those people's names, which puts them in direct jeopardy of life and death. Right.
People have named them. They've been before court.
Mhm.
No one's ever been put in prison.
No one's ever even
Um,
been put in prison for
What
that.
little?
He got just talking on the street about this case that was going on. Over a year in prison, no plea entered, no nothing. No, you don't get your lawyer. Here is a lawyer, I guess. Go directly to prison, no plea.
Rod Liddell, who's a reporter for the Sunday Times, he breached a reporting restriction on the Stephen Lawrence murder trial. He apparently nearly jeopardised the trial. He was given a fine. No one, if you go through the law, so as well, if you read the law on contempt of court, which was so disheartening for me, and so I've been put in prison, I'm sat in prison. I'm reading all of these newspaper reports. Not one journalist, no one fought to go and get the transcripts from that court, to go and find out what was said in that court. If anyone would have done that, they'd have instantly seen that I did not plead guilty, that I was not given a fair trial, that it was over in minutes. They'd have seen all of this.
I thought you had pled guilty because I read that in so many newspapers. I assumed you did, either under bad advice or no advice. Did the judge ask you whether or not you admitted or to anything? Did he ask you any questions?
No, he didn't ask me any questions. No, I did not open my mouth the whole time.
Did the judge particularize anything you said or did wrong? Did he say you said this word or you did that thing?
Nothing actually. What it comes out is that the section 4 is the reporting restrictions. The judge had put a reporting restriction on this case. Now, anyone, again, just go and read the law. It's what I did.
Yes, on the technicalities there. And so we're out of time though. But you can see right there, this is not a third world country. This is one of our closest neighbors. And what do you have there? Someone who, with the authority there and going along with it, has someone who they officially disappeared right there. There's no real lawyer, no real plea entered, no real trial. Go directly to prison, and he spent several months in solitary confinement for his own protection because people hate him so much, right? That's what I'm saying. You start looking at what are we here for? To help or to harm? It's like that's sort of why they had that old phrase of if they're here to help, you should be really worried because they might not be, right? And so we'll stop for there and we'll pick up there next time. Hopefully you guys like that. Probably the biggest thing there with that one for me is doesn't matter who you are, those processes should always be the same. So if someone hates, those processes should be even more regulated, more insured. But we don't do it that way. We usually increase scrutiny to people. Welcome to society. See you guys next time. I'm getting old. I don't have any endurance today.